No expert.
Okay.
Oh, and we are recording this meeting. So, but I'm no expert about these things. Just to give you a bit of background, so I live at home with my mum and dad, and during the pandemic, we decided to do some like home renovations and retrofitting to the house. Had a lot of time to think about things, as most people did during lockdown. And I could see that things in the world would probably be going the wrong way financially, and we needed to kind of like made some drastic upgrades. So like just to try and save some money, and we were fortunate enough to have those kind of savings in the bank, and using various government grants and things that we ended up getting some upgrades, including solar and a battery, followed by a heat pump. And before that, we got an EV, which is, I mean, often known as the gateway drug to like renewable technology, because you get the EV, you go onto a smart tariff, you realize how much you're saving on your bills, and then you start thinking, oh, what can I do to save more of my bills? So like, it wasn't, I'll be full disclosure, honest about this. The environment wasn't the priority when I was thinking about all of this tech. It was about saving on bills, which I think is a priority for a lot of people, unfortunately. But I mean, the benefit is with some of this technology is that it does, you know, help to lower our carbon emissions and help the environment. And obviously, we're going to be talking a bit about that. So thanks for joining us. The first slide. So the world is burning, quite literally. I mean, climate change, the climate is getting hotter, and our weather patterns are becoming more extreme. That is a fact. Even like the UK government have on their website that, you know, the weather events that we're seeing right now, we've had 3 consecutive heat waves this summer. And it's attributed to higher carbon emissions and that are produced by burning fossil fuels. This is going to get worse. So the image you're seeing on the screen is actually an image from 2022's heat wave, where Britain recorded for the first time 40 degrees centigrade, and the Met Office announced a red alert warning, a risk to life warning in the UK for the first time. So it's a very, very serious issue that we're having to tackle. You know, when we're thinking about conversations about heat pumps, we're like, well, we're talking about heating and insulation. What's that got to do with, you know, like all these heat waves that are happening in summer? But the climate changing, the climate crisis that we've got is also contributing to more extreme swings in weather. So we're getting harsher winter, like the cold snap in 2022 again. So the same year that we had some of the hottest weather, we also had on record some of the most extended kind of like cold periods for over 10 days in Britain that the Met Office recorded, which contributed to, you know, like a bit of a deep freeze for Britain for 10 days. Not a long time, I know, but it can be, you know, in terms of personal health for people needing to keep warm in their homes, and in not very well insulated homes. It's you know, it is a serious issue. And this image is from my back garden on that year as well, when we had that deep freeze. So, but the truth is that our winters are getting shorter and milder, and our summers are getting longer and hotter. And I've only had a heat pump since 2022, so I've been able to record some data, but you can kind of see like a downward trend on my energy usage per every winter. So like, which was quite alarming to me. Obviously 2022 had quite an extreme winter, but it has been kind of like I've been using less energy per year. And the heat pump works, you know, the same every year, really. So like it's not that the heat pumps improved in any way. It's just our winters have been getting alarmingly mild as well. But yeah, obviously when winters do come, people do need to be in a state where they're living comfortably and healthily as well. So, you know, staying in a warm space is a healthy space. And actually staying in a cool space is a healthy space when we're talking about this current heat wave, because we have just had on the news reported 2,700 deaths in the UK. So these extreme weather patterns aren't going to be any good to us in terms of personal health. So it's one of the reasons why we probably should be thinking about adaptation and how we kind of cope with like the climate crisis. So and yeah, so when we talk about like carbon emissions, when you look at kind of like the average households emissions, you can see why heat pumps are critical, because home heating contributes to the biggest portion of carbon emissions from a UK household. This data has been taken from 2019, but like the actual data hasn't changed that much. It's generally the same. To put this into context, UK homes are like the fourth biggest emitters of like carbon. When you talk about types of carbon emissions, you've got energy generation, which is at the top. You've got transport, then businesses, offices, and then domestic homes is number 4. But like you've got beneath that, you've got agriculture. So our homes are above like agriculture. You might think that it's actually below that, but UK homes in that scale contributes to about 15% of carbon emissions. So if we can do something to reduce some of the biggest portion of that, I think it would be a benefit to the environment overall. So that gives you a bit of perspective. And heat pumps are kind of a way of helping to reduce those carbon emissions quite dramatically. They can reduce emissions by 80%, and that figure actually rises to 95% if you can be on a 100% renewable tariff. And it increases comfort, like personal comfort in the house. You always have like the heating on. Since we've had the heat pump, it's like warm all the time in the house. It's never off, and it's lovely balanced temperature. It never gets too hot, never gets too cold. Reduces bills because they're way more efficient.
What temperature?
So our house sits at about, because the heating's on all the time, and it's a bit of a different kind of feeling when it's on all the time. So I set it at, like, I set the thermostat to 20. It rises a bit above that. It usually creeps up between 20.5 and 21. And it just hovers between that all the time. And that's in every space. Before we had a heat pump, like there would be corners of the house which were cold, like, you know, like in our hallway up the staircase and stuff. Everything's warm now because the heat is just permeating all the way around the house all the time. So like, it's lovely. And as I say, I live at home with my parents, and they're very elderly. My dad's 87. He has a lot of kind of like blood flow issues and things, so he needs to be in a warm space. Otherwise, his hands go literally blue and black quite quickly. So yeah, so it's comfortable to live in. They reduce bills and they help balance the grid. I'll talk a little bit about that a bit later, balancing the national grid in terms of like energy consumption as well. These technologies can really help compared to gas boilers, which most of us are on in the UK, because the UK has a really high proportion of people heating their homes with gas boilers. So it's going to get a bit techie here, but I was going to try and explain generally what a heat pump, the types of heat pumps and how they generally work. So heat pumps don't kind of like produce heat. by burning stuff, it moves heat from one space to another. In the case of a heat pump, it moves heat from the outside to the inside of the home. And it essentially does that via science. There are two sorts of heat pumps that are commonly installed. They're ground source heat pumps, where you've got pipes that go underground, and like you have a fluid that goes underground, collects the heat from beneath the ground and pumps it back up and into like your radiators, heats up the water in the radiators. And then you've got air source heat pumps, which are much more commonly being installed because they're more affordable than ground source heat pumps. Ground source heat pumps, you need to excavate the ground, and not everyone's got a massive back garden where you've got a coil pipe that you can put it down, or like do a vertical pipe. It's a very costly affair to do that. So often people are getting air source heat pumps, which has got basically a fan unit that sits outside of your house and drags in hot air, and it's using essentially refrigeration technology, just like your fridge freezer. So every single one of you, unless you don't have a fridge freezer, already has a heat pump in your house, because it's exactly the same technology. It uses a compressor to basically enhance the heat, and a bit like the fridge. If you think about fridge freezer as your home, it's a cabinet which keeps all your food cool by dragging the heat out of that space. And if you touch the back of a fridge, it'll be quite warm. So if you think about the heat pumps that we're talking about, doing that in the opposite direction. So if you actually put your hand on the fan unit on the outdoor unit on a heat pump, it's freezing cold, but your radiators will be warm inside. So that's essentially how it works, and and they can pull heat from even minus 25 degrees. And like a lot of people are like, but how is that possible? It's freezing. If you stood in minus 25, you'd probably freeze to death very quickly. But actually, when you're talking about heat, if you measure it in Kelvin, absolute zero is 200 minus 275 degrees C. So like 25, anything above that has got heat in the atmosphere. So heat pumps are very efficient to kind of like pull that heat into a home. So basically some of the benefits of like a heat pump versus a like modern gas boiler. I mean, this illustration is quite nice to kind of like illustrate the first point in terms of efficiency. Like most modern gas boilers, when optimally installed, are only 92% efficient. And I underlined optimally installed because most gas boiler engineers aren't installing gas boilers optimally in your property. They just, I mean, like if they were, I mean, they could say they are, but like they're not really. If they can do a job in an afternoon, they're kind of like doing a bit of guesstimating. So like you're never usually running it optimally, and often the user is never running their boiler optimally as well. So you're not usually getting 92% efficiency. You're getting more like 80 to 85% efficiency. And now, so like what that means is for every kilowatt of gas that you're burning, you're only producing 0.2 kilowatt of like heat in your home, usable heat. Whereas heat pumps using a compressor are 300 to 400% efficient. So as the diagram explains, you use 1 kilowatt of electricity, it's able to pull in 2 kilowatts of heat from the outside, and then output like 3 kilowatts of heat. So like 3 to 4 kilowatts, depending on how efficient your heat pump is. So they're incredibly efficient, which means you're burning less electricity, you're burning less fuel, which is going to save you bills ultimately, and also lower the carbon emissions that you're going to be creating from the use of the electricity that you're going to be using. So, and as I said before, you've got this constant comfort all around the house. They deliver temperatures at heating at much lower temperatures in the radiators and gas boilers. So they work on a kind of low and slow kind of methodology. So if you actually touch the radiators of some radiators of people who've got heat pumps, like in my house, most of the time they feel lukewarm. But as I said before, my house is always constantly at 21, no matter how cold it is inside. And part of the reason why it's able to do that is it uses something called weather compensation, which I'll talk about in a minute. And that's kind of like controlling how hot your radiators get. And they last longer. So like as pieces of equipment, they are more expensive, but they do last on average 15 to 25 years compared to a gas boiler, which is 10 to 15 years. So it's a much better investment to have longer term. So you won't only just save on your bills, but in terms of like replacement as well, you've got a piece of equipment that's going to be lasting a much better longer time. And I mean, this might be a bit of a contentious one, but like there's little risk of death as well in the house. I mean, like we're pumping in a combustible material quite happily into all of our properties for cooking and for heating every single day, and it's toxic as well. Like cooking on a gas hob, there have been studies that shown it's contributed to respiratory illnesses. It doesn't do any good to your health really, and you even like last year, I think maybe it was earlier this year that I saw on the news like an unfortunate gas explosion which killed a family in South London. So, and yet we still use this technology, and there's people in the government who are trying to promote using hydrogen as a more explosive gas than what we use in as in natural gas that we use for like gas boilers. And that's absolutely bonkers. Not only is it really costly and not energy efficient to actually produce that hydrogen, but then pumping that into people's homes when it is so volatile and explosive is a nuts proposal. And like heat pumps have existed for like 50 to 60 years, this technology. So like it's a tried and tested method of heating and cooling. So I don't know why there are people that are trying to, well, it's people in the gas industry who are trying to survive, I think. So like they're finding ways of staying relevant. So anyway, heat pumps are a lot safer to run, and the equipment normally stays on the outside of the house as well. So you don't have any equipment in the inside. So I mentioned about weather compensation. This is getting a bit techy, but like all you need to know is a heat pump works automatically. So essentially what happens is it's got a temperature sensor on the outside of your house that measures what temperature is. So whenever the temperature outside gets colder, your radiators get hotter. And whenever the temperature gets cooler or milder, the radiators get cooler. So it balances the heat of the radiators according to what it thinks it needs to reach your target temperature, say 21 degrees inside the house. And it will always kind of like ride that like the pedal of a car. So it's kind of like accelerating and decelerating gradually. And that also kind of like helps to save a lot of energy, because when it's like 5 degrees outside, you don't need to be having your radiators raging hot like most people do when they've got a gas boiler on. Like they might be running their gas boiler at 50 degrees. When it's 5 degrees outside, I think my heat pump is running water into the radiators at about 31 degrees. So it's a lot more efficient. I'm not burning as much energy. I'm still getting the same levels of comfort. I don't need to think about it because it's all set up. And what's important to note is that this needs to be done at the installation, and installers need to be able to commission and install the products properly. Because heat pumps are a bit more temperamental than gas boilers, which are like a lot more forgiving, where you can just whack up the temperature. You can get heat very, very quickly. And when the cost of gas was nothing, it didn't matter to anyone. But now that gas is actually costing, it does matter to people, which is why people are struggling to heat their homes as well. But like if a heat pump is actually installed very like as it's meant to be, and it's done, the system design is done accurately by a knowledgeable installer that explains how the system works to you and then hands off to the customer, you'll be comfortable all the time and you can just leave it alone. And that's exactly what this next slide says. You just leave it alone. I know there's been a lot of social conditioning where I think through having gas boilers and making it as simple as possible, there's an on and off switch on a gas boiler, but that's actually an inefficient way of running a gas boiler as well. Gas boilers do modulate. Gas boilers also can have weather compensation added to it, but you'll be hard-fetched to find a gas engineer who would want to install that, because then they'll have to explain how your gas boiler works. And instead, if they put an on and off button and a timer, they can say, well, if you can set it on this timer, or here's the on and off button. If you're cold, you can switch on the heating and you can get hot. And when you're hot, you can press that button again and switch it off. But, you know, the question is, why wouldn't you want to just be comfortable all the time and just let the machine do the work for you so you can get on with your life? There's often the case where people are either too hot or too cold at letting their house, and that can contribute to, you know, ill health as well, because your body likes to be at a steady temperature and a comfortable temperature to work and to live. So, but this was a little conversation that I noticed on a Facebook group, actually. So like someone actually asking, going, why can't I just switch on a heat pump when I'm cold and switch it off when I'm hot? And people just kept answering saying, I mean, you can, but why would you want to? Why isn't it just set up so that it's keeping you comfortable all the time? You just leave it alone. So they can be much simpler to run in that way. And as I've been alluding to, I mean, heat pumps for heating are essentially the same equipment as air conditioners, because air conditioners, most modern air conditioners are air-to-air heat pumps. So one basically pushes air from, you know, on both sides, and one's push the heat through air on both sides, and the other's pushing heat from the air to water on into your radiators on that side. In fact, the air to water heat pumps, a lot of them can actually do the cooling as well, but manufacturers switch that component off by software, because although YouTubers have hacked these systems because it is just software, they to demonstrate that you can get your radiators freezing cold in the summer to actually get a cooling effect, which works quite effectively. You might damage your pipes by freezing, or like condensation, or like get damp and stuff, which isn't desirable, obviously. So manufacturers normally on air to water heat pumps switch that component off, but air conditioners do both heating and cooling. So in the situation that we're living in right now, where we've got our third consecutive heat wave, and a lot of people are running out trying to buy air conditioners, which are really, really cheap, and there are problems with those portable ones, the monoblock ones, that they're running out to Lidl to get, because they don't work very efficiently compared to these, what they're known as split systems, where you have the outdoor unit, you've got this fan unit that sits on the outside of the house, and then you've got units inside the house that are cooling the house. Those monoblock systems basically in hot weather go into a bit of a death spiral, because all of the components are inside the property, and the back of that air conditioner gets hot. It's got this exhaust pipe that's trying to take hot air out of the room, which is actually removing some air, creating negative pressure, and you're then dragging more hot air in from the cracks in your, you know, door and stuff. So those kind of portable ones don't really work very well compared to these kind of like properly installed air-to-air heat pumps. So there have been a lot of conversations on the news and the media, lots of people debating whether we should be getting air conditioners or not, and like, is it wasteful? I mean, in a couple of slides before, I was showing that, the heat pumps are 80% efficient. They can reduce carbon emissions by 80%. So, I mean, and they run, 3 to 4 times more efficiently than a gas boiler. So you're burning less energy overall. So even if you had an air conditioning unit running all year, you'd be still emitting less carbon emissions than if you had a gas boiler for the winter. And have
Can I interrupt? We have to make a decision because
there's already
40 minutes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I'm really enjoying.
Well, he only started at 25 or 22.
Yes, we can go into injury time. So
Yes, but well, I'm saying that he's only had 25 minutes so far.
I'll put on. Thanks for the note. But anyway, so in the conversation about air conditioners, I think we need to be aware that both of these things are heat pumps, and we don't talk about, well, should we have heat pumps, and are they going to be burning way too much energy and carbon and stuff? It's not a conversation we have when we talk about like winter heating. So when we're talking about summer cooling, I think there needs to be sensible conversations. There are obviously more passive ways of cooling a house that do need to be explored, but I think dismissing kind of like having an active cooling system is the wrong conversation to have, because people are getting it a bit wrong, and they are essentially heat pumps, and they're going to be useful for kind of like our adaptation and also balancing the grid as well, and lowering our carbon emissions. So going on, so before even getting a heat pump, I mean, this is quite a detailed image here, but like basically when getting a heat pump installed, a lot of people talk about getting your insulation done first, and that is true of any heating system: gas, oil, heat pumps, electric heating systems. If you get your insulation done much better in the house, your heating bills, whichever source of heat that you're using, is going to be, the bills are going to be much lower, your comfort's going to be much higher. And actually in winter, if you've got like a really airtight home, in summer, sorry, if you've got a really airtight home, your house should be a little bit cooler as well. It's because of the kind of shoddy insulation that we've got generally in all of our houses. I mean, like some of us might have insulation that's quite good in some areas. I've got insulation that's quite good in some areas, but I've also not got that great insulation in other areas, which is letting in a lot of heat into my house, and then it's getting trapped into the insulated parts, which is making my house hotter in this heat wave. So actually having a properly insulated home has massive benefits. And when we're talking about like the amount of energy that your house emits, we talk about the heat loss of the house, which is measured in kilowatt, and that's what heat pump engineers normally use to calculate what size heat pump they want to install in your property. Gas boiler engineers should do exactly the same as well, but they don't do it as accurately because it's way too much work, and they wouldn't be able to install a gas boiler in a day then. So the higher the heat loss in your property, the more it costs to heat your home. And insulating, does optimize the efficiency of your heating products. The most common thing to insulate is the roof. You emit a lot of energy from your roof, but getting external wall insulation or like cavity wall insulation, if you've got properties with a cavity in it, is a massive benefit. Before we got our heat pump, we did some external wall insulation, and before they even installed it, we did it the winter before, and we noticed the difference even with our gas boiler. it just felt so much more comfortable. So like having good insulation, you can get insulation in the floor as well, which we haven't done, but like it does help if you can get insulation wherever you can. Obviously, there's a cost to all of these things, so doing it a bit at a time as you can afford it is always going to be a benefit. Getting really good triple glazing nowadays as well will also bring things down. And the one key thing to note about heat pumps is don't wait for your boiler to break. One of my good friends really wanted a heat pump last year or the year before, and he told me he looked into it because his boiler broke down, and he discovered the kind of like journey you have to go through with a heat pump. It's not a thing that you can just install in a day. There needs to be a survey that's done, and like you need to kind of like, and the install period is more than a day. So don't leave it till when your boiler has actually broken down, because you'll find yourself buying a gas boiler because that's what you'll need. Your boiler will break down in the winter when you're cold. So you will want to replace that as quickly as possible. Otherwise, you will just be cold and ill. So as I say, it's a journey. So like usually an installer will come to your property to do like a heat loss survey. They will kind of like measure all of the rooms, all of the radiators, all of the windows, and then put it into a piece of software and calculate that heat loss in kilowatts, and then suggest a heat pump that would be of an appropriate size, suggest whether you needed any radiators upgraded, because you're running on a low temperature, so you need radiators that are bigger so it can throw out more heat. So sometimes you need radiators upgraded. We have 14 radiators in our house, and about 4 of them needed upgrading. So it doesn't always need to be the case that you need to upgrade all of them. And that's why they do these kind of like calculations, and it takes a whole day for them to do that before they've even done the job. And then with all the plumbing and electrical work, because it's a piece of electrical kit as well as plumbed kit, it does take about 4 to 5 days to get it all installed and commissioned. So it is quite a lot of work. So things you need to consider with a heat pump installation, as I mentioned, bigger radiators, so that you can throw out enough heat, and having upsized radiators does help with that, so you can run at lower temperatures successfully. Now, a heat pump, unlike a combi boiler, doesn't deliver instant heat for hot water or instant hot water. You need a traditional hot water cylinder. So you will need to find space for that, either in an attic or an airing cupboard, and a lot of people have actually got rid of those kind of things. Some people put it in their garage, but like usually the it's not insulated in there, so it's not always advisable to do it in a garage, but like you can do if you've got an insulated garage space. But like a hot water cylinder is a lot more efficient in terms of like storing heat as well than like instant hot water. So like you will be again burning a lot less fuel to have that hot water, and they'll size the hot water cylinder according to the property size and the occupancy as well. So you'll have plenty of hot water all day. You won't need to worry about your kids kind of like running out of all the hot water when you want to have a shower. So, and in some cases, the pipe work and water pressure, they need to check all of that as well. So like heat pumps work with flowing hot water much faster through the system. And also they need lots of volume of water. So ironically, older houses with old heating systems have bigger pipe work. So that we had that advantage that we didn't need to have any pipe work upgraded. It's a lot of these modern houses that are being made with really tiny, like micro bore pipe work, where a heat pump will really struggle because it really needs to get a high volume of water through the system to be able to work at low temperatures. So those are the type of considerations which sometimes that can be a bit prohibitive for people to get a heat pump for that reason. If you're considering aircon, the things that you need to consider is the wall space for the wall units. As I mentioned, there's a fan unit, a bit like an air-to-water heat pump on the outside, but you do have fan units because your radiators aren't being used. That does mean that you get more wall space if you want to remove your radiators and just use this as your own heating system, because those fan units sit above anywhere where your radiators are, so you might have more room in your rooms. So you will need an alternative hot water solution. The picture shows a heat pump hot water cylinder. So that silver bit on top of the hot water cylinder is a mini heat pump on it. So you can have solutions like that. There's also like thermal batteries that have come out, which is a bit like one of those hand warmers where you crack that bit of metal in a liquid and it suddenly changes state and becomes warm. So you get these heat batteries that essentially do the same in a box of the size of a boiler that can sit under your cabinet, and it passes electricity through to change the state of a material, which then heats the water, and then you can get kind of an instant hot water scenario. Another thing to consider is as well, this year, manufacturers like Samsung and Daikin have realized that because of these kind of like swings in temperature, like their products, which do heat and cool, they're getting out all-in-one systems now that will be coming out later in the year. So they will pipe up to your hot water cylinder and your radiators as an air-to-water heat pump, but you will also be able to do you'll also be able to do like air conditioning units in the same unit, so you won't need to service anything more than one thing. So that might be a consideration that people will have and an option. What's the bill? Basically, this gives you some figures of like how much these things cost, and it can be quite an outlay. But like after the boiler upgrade scheme, which the government gives £7,500 for a heat pump being installed to replace your gas boiler, in some cases, for some houses, it can be a free installation. It can be up to £5,500, but on average, a lot of people are seeing it's no more than a gas boiler installation, which averages between £3,500 to like £5,000 anyway, if you need to replace your hot water cylinder as well, if you still got that. So the installation costs, you can see some of the installation costs. Loft insulation is one of the most affordable things that you can change, and lots of people should be able to do that and should do that as well, whether they DIY it or get someone to professionally do it. And the government's warmer home scheme, which has come out. If you earn £36,000, if your household income is £36,000 or less, and your EPC is between D and G of your house, you might be able to get all of this stuff for free, including solar and battery as well. So like, it's worth looking into this. It's the council that actually pays for all of this kind of stuff. So they've done quite a lot of investment, the current government, to enable councils to do that. So in terms of, I'm nearly done. Yeah. In terms of how much it costs to run a heat pump. So a properly commissioned heat pump that's been installed and commissioned properly with weather compensation in not fixed temperatures, not running at fixed temperatures, so that the temperature of your radiators are variable, should be on parity to how much it costs to run a gas boiler, if not cheaper, even when you're on a flat tariff, flat rate tariff, which is a standard tariff. So you should be able to save £100 to £150 a year. If you go onto a smart tariff, because you're on an electricity, you're using something that uses electricity, you can save between £250 and £600 a year on your energy bills. And of course, you're not paying two standing charges as well. So there's a saving on top of that, because you can get rid of your gas if you choose to go with like some other cooking method as well, like an induction burner. So, and then if you couple it with like solar panels and a battery, like I've got, which is known as the Holy Trinity, commonly, you can achieve like zero bills as well. I've barely paid an energy bill in the last 3 years, and it all just pays for itself because I generate a lot of solar in the summer, which I sell to the grid because we generate more than we need. That builds up my winter credit. And in the winter, my heat pump eats up that winter credit, and then the cycle starts again. So all of these things can work in tandem. And it also helps to balance the energy grid as well when you have these technologies, because energy companies be able to take control of these systems because they're just computers and be able to run them at lower power or higher power depending on how much energy there is on the grid. If there's a surplus of energy, they might want to raise your heating just slightly so that you can consume a bit more electricity. And if there's a bit of pressure on the grid, they can dip your like power on your heat pump just slightly so that that you're not burning as much fuel, so that there's more energy to go around the nation. So there's clever things to be able to achieve when you go in an all-electric household. And the payback of these investments tend to be about 5 to 10 years. Just to wrap up, there's some places where I would recommend that you go and look if you're looking into getting a heat pump or insulation or like solar. The MCS is the certification body in the country that certifies like installers, products, including heat pumps and solar and battery products. They are the official ones that did the consultation with the government in terms of the bus grant. So like I would go to that website first. You'll be able to find local installers from there because MCS registered installers are there. So it's a really good place to start to find out more information about local installers. There's an organization called HeatGeek who have been training a lot of engineers, gas engineers, to upgrade them to be able to install heat pumps properly. And HeatGeek have got a plethora of information for consumers and for installers. So anyone who wants to learn any more about the systems and how to run them successfully, I would definitely go and check out that website as well. They've got a lot of great stuff, and they also install heat pumps, so you can get a quote from them as well with their national partnership of installers that they've got. Homeowners Q&A podcast is really interesting as well, similar to HeatGeek. You can get a lot of information, and there's a few YouTubers as well who I would recommend that you see. So, and that's it. And this is my heat pump on the left-hand side, and I actually did get an air conditioning unit this summer, but it's a split system, but it's a portable split system. So it has got an outdoor unit which goes outside of a window, and it's got an indoor unit. So, and that's working really, really efficiently. It's on right now, and it's burning about, I'd say about 100 to 200 watts.